If you're a woman in your 30s thinking menopause is decades away and not worth worrying about yet, and you believe that when the time comes, you'll just figure it out with your doctor, but you want to maintain your strength, your energy, and your physique as you age without being blindsided by changes that could derail your progress, this episode is for you. Today, my guest reveals why waiting until perimenopause symptoms appear is already too late. The women who thrive through menopause started preparing decades earlier. You'll discover the hidden timeline of hormonal changes that begins years before you notice symptoms, the silent killers that affect asymptomatic women, and the specific biohacks that can transform your menopause experience from survival mode to optimization. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today we are discussing why preparing for menopause should start potentially decades before you think it does. My guest today is Zora Benhamou, a gerontologist and biohacker who hosts the amazing Hack My Age podcast. Go follow that right now, Hack My Age. She holds a master's in gerontology from USC, has specialized certifications in menopause through the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine. At 54, she embodies what she teaches, living as a digital nomad while interviewing women about menopause experiences in every country she visits. Through hundreds, I think well over 300 podcast episodes and interviews with hundreds of women worldwide, Zora has identified patterns. We love patterns. We love data. This is very helpful to you guys that most women never see coming. Today, you're going to learn why the strongest, most resilient women through this period of life, through menopause, are those who started preparing early on in their 30s, what the research reveals about hormonal trajectories, and the specific biohacks that create the biggest impacts decades later. So maybe you're in your 30s thinking this doesn't apply to you yet, or you're approaching perimenopause, wondering what you should be doing right now. Either way, this conversation is going to answer your questions. And Zora, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I should update the bio. I'm now 55. Forgot to do that.
Yes, I was thinking about it when it comes to age and these biographies. I was wanting to say that. So, but you look like 35, right? So, and that's the demographic we're talking to today. And this might sound like a basic question, but how well informed do you think women are about what menopause even is and what to expect?
Very little, honestly. Okay. Very, very little. And that includes me not that long ago. And it's kind of shocking. Nobody's talking to us. Whenever I've interviewed over 200 women around the world, I stop them on the street. I say, answer 5 questions about menopause. One of those questions is, did your mother speak to you about menopause? 99% of the people say no. My culture, women don't do that. I'm like, well, it's not just your culture. There's a lot of other cultures answering exactly the same way as you. So unfortunately, no one's preparing for us. As for menopause, usually our mothers are not speaking to us about it. Our doctors are not prepared about it. Our doctors don't really know as much about it. It's not part of the medical curriculum in most medical schools. So, and there's not a whole lot of research on it as well. So when you consider actually not that long ago, women were dying in their 50s, it wasn't a topic really of concern. So it's now that we're living longer. We are living now up to 30, sometimes 40% of our lives, women, in menopause or this post-menopause stage. So in fact, we need to understand menopause a whole lot more. And we're just, unfortunately, scratching the surface of it. So women are not informed, but they are getting informed by social media and podcasts.
Yeah, it is. Even all the interviews that I've done and the women I've spoken to and researching this and also this idea that, okay, I'm a man, so of course I don't understand this, but every woman around me must understand this. And if only I was Mel Gibson and I could read women's minds in that movie he was in, which is a terrible thought, actually. I don't want to do that. Not because of the women, but because of how I would handle the information. And then talking to my wife and thinking how her mom didn't talk to her about half the things that she needed to know later in life. And all of that makes sense now. And guys, if you go check out Zora's Instagram, you'll see these interviews with women where they're asked I'll call them simple questions that if you follow the health space, you might know some of these, and yet a vast majority of women don't seem to be aware. So education is important, but also the misconceptions, I think, and the gaslighting and the lack of studies into women's health over the years that we're finally maybe starting to catch up on. I don't know. Of all that information in those interviews, what are the, I guess, dangerous misconceptions first that we can kind of get out of the way, and then we can dive into some more like of the helpful information that we want to run with?
Oh, some of the misconceptions. Well, very often I'll ask a woman about, I say one of the first questions I ask is, are you in menopause or perimenopause? And they'll say, no, I'm too young. And I said, well, how old are you? And she's like, I'm 45. Well, I'm like, that's pretty perimenopausal. I mean, it's possible, very possible to be in menopause at that age. So one of the biggest myths is that women think that it's for older women and to not even be concerned about it. And that I'm totally guilty as charged with this. I was in my 40s, didn't even know there was a word called perimenopause. And if you asked me about menopause, I was like, oh, that's something I'll think about when I'm past 50 for sure. So it's only now, because we're sort of having this menopause movement, that people are becoming a little bit more aware of menopause and that word called perimenopause. But another answer I get very often from women in their 60s or 70s, and they say, no, I didn't do menopause, or I didn't get menopause. And I'm like, well, do you still have a period? Oh, no. But, they're referring to the symptoms of menopause. Like they didn't feel a hot flash, or they didn't suffer, or they didn't. So menopause is such a broad word because we're using it for perimenopause and postmenopause. We use it for symptoms. And it's one of these things we need to be a little bit more granular when we're asking what this is. But yeah, so those are some of the misconceptions that I think I get typically. And again, this is universal. This is not something only to women in Poland or in Thailand. I get very similar responses.
Yeah, it makes sense. And the questions I get from women all the time are then, I don't get questions like what are menopause, obviously, or to help me understand menopause. It's more like these things are happening. I think I'm in perimenopause or postmenopause, and therefore it is causing issues I never had before with my physique, my body, menopause, my fat distribution. By the way, there's a new study that came out about that. It's fascinating. We should talk about that offline. Brand new study about fat distribution that really is happening right during menopause. We, again, to not deny the reality of it. And so maybe it's helpful, Zora, to understand the timeline, right? Is this predominantly a hormonal timeline, or are there other factors? Is this more systemic that women should be thinking about across their ages? So if we started from, I don't know what makes sense, 30, and then go like, okay, 30s, 40s, 50s, what is happening and what should you be aware of so we can start taking action earlier?
Good question. As a gerontologist, I always say longevity starts in childhood. And now in my menopause space, I'm saying actually menopause starts in childhood. We should know about it from very early on, just like we do our periods or something. When you think about women, the changes that we have in our hormones throughout our lifetime, from puberty and pregnancy and menopause, it's not just menopause. I think women at all ages should understand that we have hormones, that they can fluctuate, that we have testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, our main hormones. There's plenty of other hormones we can dive into if they want to, but those are just sort of the basics, I think, that we should learn from very early on. And so anyone who's listening to this at any age, start learning about it and start talking to your kids about it because it's just, a part of life, and that's fine. It's natural. It's part of life, just like your periods. We shouldn't be ashamed of it. There's still major stigma and major stereotypes around it as well that can be frightening for the younger people, like what they see on social media. It's horrifying. In fact, another myth that we need to bust is that everyone has a different experience, right? Or everyone, we all have the myth is we all have the same experience, but the truth is we all have different experiences, and there's plenty of women who are sailing through menopause without those outward symptoms. The things are happening on the inside, but on the outside, they're actually looking great. They're feeling great. And we want to disrupt some of those as well. But I think definitely if you are at any age seeing a change in your mood or in your periods or your skin, like think about your hormones maybe. And I'm not saying it's menopause or perimenopause. It could be some hormonal shift. And it could be just a temporary shift because of any kind of outward factors or inward factors. But I would say if you want to dive a little deeper into menopause, about in your 30s is a really good time because the average age of losing our progesterone, which is one of our main hormones, sex hormones, is happening about age 35. And it actually takes a really steep dive around 35. Not estrogen. Everybody's like, oh, we all fall off the cliff in menopause. No, estrogen actually, the loss from our 30s is a lot more gradual than progesterone. So the signs of progesterone loss would be maybe you are not sleeping as well as you used to. Maybe you're a little bit more anxious or anxious when you never were before, or a little bit moody, and it's outside of, let's say, your period. We can say, oh, during certain cycles, and maybe I'm always like that. But if it's shifting, it's kind of like every night I'm struggling with sleep, then that's a sign that maybe this is your progesterone starting to head out the door, because we have early perimenopause, we have mid perimenopause, and we have late perimenopause, or sort of like all these different stages. And the early perimenopause is in your 30s. So just being aware of that, because your doctor may go, oh, you're depressed, or here's an antidepressant, which maybe you need, but maybe you don't. And so the low hanging fruit for me would be like, well, why don't you just go test your progesterone if you're in your 30s and see maybe if you're low. And then you can decide if you want to top it up with hormones or do some other type of protocol to try to balance out your hormones. But understanding your hormones definitely for preparation for peri and post-menopause is a good idea in your 30s.
Yeah, you have a lot of good takeaways there I want to dive into. So we'll kind of go backwards, since that's fresh in the mind, of testing your labs and knowing your numbers. And I think that's great for everyone. As a coach myself, the more I realize that biofeedback and natural lifestyle changes will take you to a certain point, and you should be doing those. But then there could be other, physiological changes that are happening, men and women at any age, like you said. And it's good to have a baseline, right? It's good to just know maybe this is my normal. So when it comes to understanding your hormones, people get overwhelmed, and they also often can't find the support they need in the medical industry. This is what I've heard, Zora, right? Is that traditional GPs and healthcare practitioners, hey, you're 30, you're too young, we're not going to test this, right? Or right. Or you go to, there's these fly by night clinics everywhere too, trying to make a buck off of irresponsible prescription of, especially testosterone clinics. But anyway, so anybody listening who, let's say she's 25 or 30, she's listening and wants to get labs, what's the best approach for that?
Oh, I would say it depends on the symptoms, really. Okay. Again, if we're talking about possible menopause or perimenopause, but it's so much more than that. It's not just the loss of your hormones, especially if earlier on. It could be, if you're tired, it could be just a vitamin deficiency, right? Maybe possibly vitamin B's. So I would say it's not just, let's say you can look at your estrogen. I would say still in your 20s and 30s, know where you're at. Do your estrogens, your progesterone and your testosterone, and like all your markers. Like, it's great to know where you're at when you're healthy, when you're young and full of hormones, because we're finding out as we are trying to figure out our formula, our hormone. Like, if a woman is taking hormones, there is no one size fits all. There isn't like, here you go, 100 milligrams of progesterone for everybody, which is kind of what starting point like doctors to do. But you'll find some women, they need 50, some women need 200. Same thing goes for their estrogens that they're taking. Some women need much higher doses because they're not absorbing, and others need lower dosages. And some are feeling great with lower blood levels of, say, estrogen, and some need higher. And so we don't really know if maybe I was always like, that's normal for me to be low, or it's normal for me to be high. We don't really know, because I wasn't testing my sex hormones in my 20s and 30s. I wish I did. So it is a good time to just get the full blood panel. When I was in my 20s and 30s, it never even occurred to me to get a full blood panel of anything unless you were sick.
Right.
So, but
or
now
for your physical, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're in this health optimization space. So I wish I did it. So I do recommend just getting all this sex hormones done, and your thyroid, and of course your cardiovascular markers, and some of these big bone density is another one, because actually you can start losing your bone in your 30s. It's very normal to start losing your bone, right, in your 30s. So it's like, you may be surprised if you have osteopenia in your 20s and 30s. And so you need to do something about it, and so that you don't get up to 50 and have a fracture. And I don't remember if we talked about this last time with you, but there's not only a bone density scan, but there's one that shows bone strength as well, because you can have lower bone density, but actually have really strong bones. So you don't need to panic if you have a low bone density, if they are strong.
What scan is that for the bone
It's
strength?
called the REM scan, REMS,
REMS.
I don't know, radio electromagnetic something. I don't remember. It's a long name,
Sure.
but it's a REM scan as opposed to a DEXA scan. And it's a really good, I think it's great. It's kind of new. It's technology. It hasn't been adopted yet. A lot of people haven't heard of it, and they didn't hear about DEXA when that first came out either. So I think it just still needs some time, but I think it's really awesome because it does a lot. It does the same thing that DEXA does, but even more.
Yeah. Just so the listener knows, when Zora mentioned last time we talked, we have an episode on Hack My Age coming out where we talked about bone and muscle strength and lifting and all of that related to this. So definitely check that out. Nice plug there. Okay. And,
thank you. It was a fun conversation.
Okay. So getting a baseline is a good idea. There's a lot of ways to do it now. You could do it out of pocket through like a local lab. You could do it through a medical person. You also mentioned symptoms being important. And it sounds like you're saying as soon as symptoms are obvious, or at least start to present themselves and aren't temporary or not associated with something that has occurred, let's say periodically, that's also an indication, right? We hear the same with, men with testosterone. It's like, it may not just be in the numbers, it may be in the symptoms or a combination of the two. When should someone freak out and think that it's a hormone thing or something else? You know what I mean? Versus these are normal, because I suspect I heard, was it you or somebody talking about hot flashes, and they were totally surprised about how it actually felt when they got there. It was totally different what they expected. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
yeah. That wasn't me, but no, I've heard that before too. I still haven't had one. I felt hot, but not the classic. That will be me if I ever have one, because I have an idea what it may feel like. And actually, I wore a vest. It was funny because I went to one of these menopause society conferences, and they have a vest that you can wear that men and women, everyone can wear to mimic a hot flash, and they have it all the way up to your neck, and they just turn up the heat, and you feel it. But for me, I was like, "Are you sure it's on?" and they were like, "That's funny because most people are feeling and they touch like, yeah, it's on." I'm like, I don't know. I guess I do saunas too often.
You like the heat, yeah.
I didn't honestly feel very much, but she says normally people go, wow, that's pretty intense. So you can feel that. But the question you had was, when do you freak out? For someone, we should never freak out.
How can you recognize that these are symptoms worth investigating?
Yes. Investigating. And you're just there investigating. And it's going to be hard to investigate when you're perimenopause in terms of testing your blood work, because you can test in the morning and then test in the evening, and there'll be two totally different levels, or test on one day and then the other. But a really good medical practitioner, or any kind of practitioner and someone who understands hormones, will tell you to test on certain days of the month, usually 19 to 22. Well, it depends on what you're testing. And then they'll look for certain levels, and then they may ask you to repeat it several times, or take a urine test, which can look at metabolites over the course of 24 hours. There's many different types of tests that you can see in terms of where your hormones are and what they're doing and how they're behaving, which pathways the metabolites are going down, which is quite interesting. So I would say a woman usually at most ages, she understands her periods very well. Like when it's coming. And usually women are quite regular, whether it's always day 25 or always day 28 or day 29. And she'll notice if something's off. If something is, maybe she's a little bit earlier or a little bit later, maybe her periods are a little bit heavier, or maybe they're a little bit lighter, or maybe she even skips a month and she's not pregnant. So I think a period is a really good indication. So I strongly advise, like any girl who get your period, start getting a period tracker or an app or something, and understand the fluctuations, and you're going to know what to expect. So I think that's a really good biomarker to follow. And then if you, in terms of, could this be perimenopause? Again, there are documented 103 symptoms.
Okay.
103. So
yeah,
really could be anything.
Got it.
Changes in hair thinning. These are signs of perimenopause. Changes in skin. Usually it's more dry, and that's a lack of estrogen. But when you speak to a teenager and they get acne and they're like, it's on the chin, it must be hormonal. Like, that's hormonal, probably not perimenopause. Again, it depends on the age and what you are. But if you are working with somebody who understands menopause, then you usually can spit out some of these symptoms, and then a doctor may conclude, this could be, some kind of hormonal shift, which could be perimenopause, or it could be, again, something else. And interesting because I was just speaking to another person before you, and we were talking about treatments. And I've been listening to this episode. Did you watch The Diary of a CEO?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There was this episode I'm watching right now about herbs and herbal treatments. And this is a herbalist, and he's talking about all these things. And this is a case study. I have, Sheila, she's 39 and she has moodiness, anxiety, changes in her period. I'm like, she's in perimenopause. So my first thought is test her hormones, and then, you could maybe offer her some progesterone cream topically, and, it's very, very safe. But he's thinking, no, I gave her X, Y, and Z herbs, and now she felt better. Her periods are regular. So, is it a hormonal perimenopause? Almost doesn't matter, but you have a menu of choice in terms of how do you want to feel better? And and if you talk to a Chinese medicine doctor, it may be, you need to start moving more. You need to exercise a little bit. Maybe you need to eat certain foods, and they're very much into the whole thing. And you got to lower your stress, and that will be the prescription that you get. And you can choose, but I would love doctors now or the future to offer what resonates better with you, like hormones, or do you want herbs? Do you want to just change your lifestyle? But in terms of panicking, I would say if you did some hormonal testing and you got to go by symptoms. You got to rule out, because if you're bleeding and it could be something very, very serious if you're bleeding really heavily. So again, some doctors are actually there. I don't know if you've interviewed Kim Vopni, but she's just brilliant when it comes to pelvic floors and pelvic floor health. And she talks a lot about how hysterectomies are overprescribed, especially women in their 30s and 40s when you're a very heavy bleeder. And it's kind of like the first thing to go. Let's just remove, your ovaries, or let's just remove the uterus. Like we don't need that. And I've met women who agreed to that, and they didn't realize, oh, wait, I wanted kids. What do I do? And they got gypped out of that. And so you should really be informed of all the things that are positive and negative when it comes to certain things, especially when it comes to surgery. So her low-hanging fruit is always going into progesterone or hormones, right? Let's look like we don't need to take out these body parts. Maybe you do need to, I don't know, but it shouldn't be the first call to action. And so I would say if anyone is, in their 30s and they're told that they need to have a hysterectomy, I would certainly exhaust everything else first that are less invasive, and then go on to say, if there's nothing else that works, then okay, maybe do what you have to do.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot there that resonates with me and people I've talked to as well. You mentioned herbs, right? And I think, okay, adaptogens, right? I've known women who have some anxiety or stress, and they're doing everything right. They're trying to manage the stress naturally, and something's just different that wasn't there a couple of years ago. And then they start taking ashwagandha, and it's like night and day. And that's all they need for the next 10 years. You know what I mean? It's interesting. And we don't know why that is, right? It's probably something in the way we live today in Western society that is triggering that in some sense, right? With the stress that we're not eliminating, but, having a menu of options is a great idea. I also, I'm a big fan of lifting, of course. And I think for a lot of people, just like if they're not lifting and then they start lifting weights and exercising, that right there is a huge game changer for anyone to try, at least. Like, it's free, it's your own body, do it, But yeah, taking
You
out your
can raise
uterus
your
and ovaries is a
testosterone
different
levels
thing.
for
Yeah.
free with just
Yes.
lifting weights. You
Yes.
don't need to
Yes.
buy anything or
Yeah.
like everybody's different, of course, and but you can measure this stuff. You can just measure your testosterone now and go lift some heavy weights and see if it moved the needle, right?
That's biohacking 101, right?
Yeah.
The very basic of taking a before and after. Thyroid comes to mind too, because you're talking hormones, and that seems to be another big issue today and for a lot of people, they're just under eating and that's what's doing it. And for others, it is some sort of wonky relationship between their T3, reverse T3, T4 conversion. And that's where it gets complicated. Estrogen too, with the estradiol and the testosterone, the DHEA, it's like so much. So yeah.
Have you heard of thyropause?
Okay, I can guess what it is. It's thyroid related menopause or something. What is that?
Yeah, it's when your thyroid goes south, and it's usually during this period of life.
Okay.
Dr. Amy Horniman, we did a recording. I'll connect you to her if you don't know her because she's brilliant. Yeah. She's called the Thyroid Fixer, and that's her podcast. And she's just so focused on thyroid. And we did an episode on thyropause, and she calls thyroid the master hormone. Like some people would say, cortisol is a master hormone. Some people say thyroid is. I mean, and it depends who you are, what your specialty is. But the game is that all the hormones are interconnected. It's not just, let's just put in one and we'll replenish it. No, that one will have an effect, a downstream effect on other hormones. It's a symphony, and it's about getting it right. And that's why so many women in menopause, when they start hormone therapy, they're like, this is not working, or I feel worse, or I feel nothing. Well, because you have to find the right levers to pull, and there's just no one size fits all. And I encourage them to don't give up, like just try up or down or different formula or different dosage or different completely delivery method. Again, we're all so different if you go down that route. So, but again, a lot of these things can be pulled, the levers can be pulled outside of hormones as well. So
yes. And I think it's a good approach to look at both, right? Is what you're saying, is like, be open to both, do some biohacking, do some measurements. Like it's fairly inexpensive. Thyroid is an interesting one. I have a coach on my team. She's personal experience of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's and thyroiditis. And so she's learned a lot through that process. Actually worked with Karen Martell, who I know is a friend of yours, and you guys connect all the time. And I love Karen too. She and I have connected. So it's like a small circle here, but the thyroid thing is interesting because it regulates your metabolism, right? And so if it's off, that could significantly affect your metabolic rate. And like what I see is just you start a small calorie deficit and your body just immediately adapts. And then you try to increase it, it immediately adapts. It's kind of a funky thing that creates what seems like weight loss resistance. Obviously, if you starve yourself, you're going to lose weight, but nobody wants to do that, right? So all this is part of menopause, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And progesterone also has an effect on the thyroid as well when you're losing your progesterone. So, it's not, there's so many reasons why somebody could have a low thyroid or high thyroid, dysfunctional thyroid. It is, I agree though, that it is a very important hormone, and it's not a thing that we should just brush off. And I think a lot of traditional doctors, that when you go to get your labs, the range is really wide. So you can be within the normal range, but still like, my hair is falling out and I'm so tired and I'm bloated and I can't lose this weight. And they're like, I don't know, your numbers are normal. But that's where we want to get into maybe a functional medicine approach or optimal ranges, because any functional medicine doctor would have a much tighter range and say, this is why you're not feeling well. So let's try to figure out how can we move the dial and getting closer into the optimal range, and you'll probably feel better. They won't dismiss you or gaslight you and go,
right. Yeah. And there's ratios, and there's also your own baseline, like you already mentioned before. So that makes me think now, since we're talking about preparing early for this, and you mentioned talking to your kids, right? Because that's as early as we can get. I have 2 daughters as well. I love that my wife talks to them about things. We homeschool, so we have like a health subject in there. Cool. And I've already talked to them about genitals and sex and like all that stuff to whatever level they are, it's appropriate for their age. Yeah. Things that our parents just didn't do very often, like our generation in the 80s, right? But the question is, when it comes to menopause, if the mother isn't super informed, like it looks like is the case currently, and they listen to this podcast and the first time they're hearing about this, right? What should they talk to the kids about?
In terms of menopause?
Sure. Yeah. Since we're preparing for the menopause. Yeah.
It depends, like you said, age appropriate, how much information can they handle? What's their interest? The simple thing is maybe if they're in their teenage years, you're like, well, you're going to have the discussion about when the periods start. You can also have the conversation that I know it's, you're struggling now, but it is going to end. And that actually sounds like a really good thing, that you won't be living bleeding for the rest of your life. And that's because the hormone are starting to decline, but just bringing a little bit of awareness in terms of I think the period is such a tangible thing for most young people that they can understand that. I would also talk to the boys as well. And you could say, understand, and I would relate it maybe just overall for hormones, because whether they're a boy or a girl, they will maybe be dealing with somebody who's going to have a pregnancy, or if not themselves, and then they're going to see again a hormonal shift and not think that they're broken and they're falling apart. We're like, no, you're pregnant, or you're just post-pregnancy and hormones are trying to shift again. So having that discussion about hormones is really good. And then as they get older, I think when you are approaching your 30s, then I would start talking more about progesterone and how that can decline, and that the hormones go up and down. Like, they're just crazy. And it's not you that's crazy. It's the hormones that are going a little wonky, and not to be afraid. And it's totally normal. And you have solutions. Again, here's the smorgasbord of choices that you can do to balance them out or replenish them, whatever it is that you want to do. But just so people are aware that maybe it's not a sleep medication they need or an antidepressant. Again, maybe it is, but there are other choices if they wanted to try that. And then as a woman is getting closer to the perimenopause phase, then again, having that discussion about perimenopause, pre, mid, and late. But I would also have them understand that we don't know what our menopause journey will be like. Like, there's the whole spectrum. It's not going to be horrible for everybody. And not to dismiss that it can be really horrible. You'll have many symptoms. You'll have all of them under the sun, and they're going to be extreme. And that happens. Totally can happen. But if that does happen to you, we got solutions. There's so much we can do, and you don't have to suffer in silence. Menopause is inevitable, but suffering really is optional. If you want to white knuckle your way through and give yourself a badge because you did it, quote unquote, naturally, suffered through it, that's your choice. Like, fine with you. But if that scares you, you don't need to go down that route. It's again, we have so many options. So, but starting with everything that you talk about in terms of getting your nutrition dialed in and having exercise as part of your daily routine are so foundational for having a smooth transition. It's not a guarantee, but it should be smoother when you have those things in place, as well as maybe sleep and your stress management and all that stuff, because they do impact your menopause journey.
Yeah, all of that's important. And I think of the phrase minimum effective dose when you talk about like white knuckling it through, doing it only naturally, which I've definitely met people who are like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take anything. I don't want to take HRT. I don't, and I'm like, okay, you're potentially limiting yourself, and others who want to try everything and they don't approach it with the scientific method of like isolating the variables, right? And so then you don't know what's working. And so the middle ground seems to be, foundation, and then see what's there, and then take one step at a time and start pushing the levers. So given that you're like the biohacking expert and we're talking about preparing early, what's something, let's say in your 20s as a woman, you should biohack or do besides what we've already talked about that will set you up for more success than most women have, knowing menopause is coming?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. First, definitely get your testing done, and definitely understanding your periods. That's just foundational. And then getting understanding how your body reacts to food and what foods are actually nourishing yourself, right? To give you energy, to make you feel good. This is really, really important, and not being underfueled or overfueled, right? You don't want to have too much body fat and you don't want to have too little, because both of those set you up for possible early menopause. Okay. We want to be at a healthy body weight. And so having that, and again, the exercise is a big component of that too. So getting in your strength training is so foundational. I talk a lot about sarcopenia as a gerontologist, and this is the age-related muscle loss, but no age-related, like there's things we can do. We're not using our muscles. And without our hormones, it can be versus when we have them, it can be a little harder to build muscle. So building that now is so vital. I honestly think that I have really good muscle mass, but I've been training and exercising since I was born. Like I was just running around. It was doing the Jane Fonda thing when I was a teenager. And I always liked exercise. And I think it's really saved me in so many ways. Yes, things have happened to me in the last several years where I go, thank God I've had good muscle, and muscle has memory as well. So you're building these muscle fibers when you're young, and the same thing goes for bone. They're so important. You may not think about it when you're young. All you're thinking about is, I just want to grow. And maybe if you're little, you're like, I want to, become Superman. But you will need those muscles and you will need those bones, especially as we're getting into our 60s and 70s and 80s, because it's going to be a lifesaver to keep us independent, to help us recover from a fall without getting a fracture. And there's things that are really bad things that happen with that. So we want to keep that. So I would say, as you're young, please get, and I don't want to say you don't have to be a bodybuilder, but just get good muscle mass and protect your bones. And those are really, really key. And again, you may struggle with that. And I've had people who tell me in my community is like they've increased their muscle mass and they're boiling it all down to sleep. Like, it's because I really focused on my sleep when growth hormone is released. So sleep is a big factor. And I know we can get away with sleepless nights when we're young and pull all-nighters and all that. But again, you want to keep things in balance, especially if you're having symptoms or if you're starting to feel like, I really need my sleep, then make it a priority. And then of course the stress component, because that's the hormone cortisol, and that can affect a lot of other things that are going on in our body.
We've talked about a concept called upward spiraling, which is when you can get one of these things improved that you just talked about, they make the others easier. And it's funny you mentioned sleep, because there's a joke like with menopausal women that I've noticed. It's, they'll say, well, what do I do? And some 20-year-old, influencer guy would be like, you need to get more sleep. And they're like, well, I have trouble sleeping because I'm in menopause. Well, you just need more sleep, and it's like this circular thing. And I've seen that. I'm like, I can't just tell people get more sleep or get better sleep. Yeah, you can hack your way to incremental better sleep. But if you're not lifting, if you're not moving, if you're not eating well, that's also going to affect your sleep, and your sleep's going to affect those, right? It's a systematic thing. So it's a spiral of like, where's your low-hanging fruit now? I've had clients who they've lifted for 20 years. That's not their concern. Their concern is they don't move throughout the day. They go and they lift 3-4 days a week, and then they don't move all day, and they have 3,000 steps. Well, all of a sudden their blood flow's low, their resting heart rate's high, their insulin sensitivity is not great. And then they just start walking more, and all of that gets better. And now they start sleeping better, right? So I'm playing off what you're saying, because when you're younger listening to this, don't wait. And if you haven't done it and you're in your 40s or 50s or whatever, don't wait, because guess what? You can see tremendous improvement when you focus on these things.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about the food and the healthy body weight part, because that could get misunderstood a lot. You talked about being overweight or potentially underweight, and overfueling or underfueling. I assume there's a fat-free mass component to that, right? Like if somebody has good body composition, maybe that's less of a concern. What does the research say, or what do you know about that?
In terms of, I'm not sure I understand the question.
In terms of body weight and its impact on early menopause. That's what I mean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, body weight, So I hate weight. I hate looking at a scale. To me, it just doesn't mean anything. If anybody gets on a scale, I say, I want to know your muscle mass. I want to know how much fat mass you have. So I think those are much better markers to look at. And then of course you have the woman who's just like, it disrupts her day and she shouldn't be on a scale and she doesn't like it. And, sometimes we remove those things altogether. But in terms of if you want to look at weight, what the research is showing in terms of menopause, if you are underweight, you have are more likely to have an earlier menopause.
Mm.
The weird thing is that there's some research coming out that shows if you're obese, like a BMI over 30, you're more likely to have a later menopause. And delayed menopause, at least I think, is actually a good thing. We want ovarian function as long as we possibly can. And there's one study that showed obese women who had, at least obese women, again, with the over 30 BMI, they had 50% higher odds of menopause after the age of 52, 53. And the average age right now in North America is 51. So it's okay. It's delayed by a couple years, but you go, well, to me, it's not a reason to
it's not a good trade-off is what you're saying.
Focus on that. It was just an interesting study. I thought, okay, I don't like that, but it's probably has a lot to do because there's your fat cells have a lot of estrogen, right? So when it's the loss of estrogen that causes that's when we have the menopause. So if you can still have some hanging around, I'm not saying if you're obese forever, you'll always have estrogen and you'll always have be menopause free, but it tends to delay menopause.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good explanation for the mechanism because I was like, is it because your reproductive health is supported because you have more fat, despite the trade-offs of being more overweight, you can, you're in a better condition physiologically to have a child and support the child because you have more fat stores. I don't know. Right. But the estrogen makes a lot of sense.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jorge, and I just kind of want to share a little bit about my experience with Wits and Weights. So I've been blown away from day one, honestly. The best thing about Wits and Weights University is that Coach Philip has everything that we need all in one place. It's easy to follow. It's easy to understand. It even gives you like an introduction course at the beginning so you can know exactly what to do. It kind of made me very conscious of my nutrition, and it's kind of set me in the right path, in the right direction. So honestly, I could not recommend it enough. One of the best things is that whenever you have any type of question, it's answered within 15, 30 minutes. You feel welcome, you feel good, and like somebody's helping you. Everything you need is there. All you have to do is basically come and join us. See you there.
And then you talked about sarcopenia, which is a super relevant topic on this show for sure. And you and I talked last time how Megan Dahlman was on the show and mentioned the term osteosarcopenia and how they're linked together. Is there anything, besides like lifting weights and moving, is there anything in your world of gerontology that you see people could be doing better or more of in their 20s and 30s? Yeah.
I would say it's shocking how many people have lost flexibility, mobility, and agility in their 20s and 30s. It's wait. You look at a baby or a young child, they do a perfect squat and they can do so many things and they're flexible. And what happened? Right. And we blame it on these chairs that we're sitting on very often. If you've ever have you been to Japan?
Once. Yeah. I was lucky to go to Japan.
Yeah. So you've
the toilets?
Sat on the floor.
I was going to say that the holes in the floor toilets too.
The squatty potties, like
anyway.
The holes in the floor.
Yeah. So you eat on the floor. That's true. You eat
on the floor. The holes, Japanese toilets are more known for their high tech bells and whistles and warm seats and stuff. It's more, I would say, China where you get the holes in the ground. And I
went in 2002, so it was a long time ago.
Okay. Well, Japan's changed.
And they actually had some of those, but you're right. Mostly they had the seat warming and the LEDs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny.
But Japanese people, you take off your shoes when you get in the house, and then you eat on the floor. Everything's on the floor. You sleep on the tatami, right? The futon, imagine, I guess we would say in America, yes, where you have just, it's like a mattress on the floor. And so you're constantly having to get up, get down, squat, and you're just always have this movement. So you don't seem to lose that mobility and agility and flexibility. So, but in our Western world, we have couches and chairs and beds that are high. So we don't need to squat so much anymore. So I think if you could work on that and keep it for the rest of your life, you're going to be really, really lucky. And I think that agility piece is really important because if you look at some older adults, not everyone, that maybe they're shuffle walking and they're just afraid to take a step because in case they fall or and they haven't practiced fall prevention. We should be all practicing fall prevention, like a stuntman, right? You just learn how to do a little roll in case you fall. Like, this is fun, and you don't have to call it fall prevention because I'm protecting my 70-year-old self. But these are really important. We don't understand until we lose it. And I mentioned to you earlier that I had osteoarthritis. I was living in the body of an 80-year-old. I know what it's like to shuffle walk and to be afraid to go take a step off the curb. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I got a glimpse of what that's like. And since I've had my hip replacements, I'm like, thank goodness, but I don't ever want to be like that. And I don't recommend it to anyone else. So please work. I know mobility classes now sound boring or not cool, but honestly, they should be a part of your weekly workout, in my opinion, if you want to talk about your future self.
Yeah, you make a really good point, right? Because I'm in a world where there's people like to lift, but sometimes, just like that person I mentioned, sits around all day, right, with his job and gets stiff. I know men and women who they start lifting, maybe they walk, but they're not doing this other component. And I like to think of it as like, doing something fun and making that part of your routine if you can for mobility, whether it is mobility stuff like yoga or stretching, but also sports, maybe, pickleball, like all of that, being agile, calisthenics, playing with your kids. Like, if you got kids, why aren't you playing with them and going outside and playing? Come on, like, just don't, and yeah, we do kind of lose that. And then you get stiff, right? You get more chance of connective tissue issues. You get the surgery. I mean, I've had rotator cuff surgery and back surgery. You talk about your hip replacement. I'm like, one day I feel like I'm going to need that. But I'm also trying to stay a little more active, do some sprinting, do this and that. Maybe not as much as I see some of my 25-year-old peers doing. I'm a little bit jealous. I'm like, man, they're like playing basketball all the time. But I am a parent too, right? So you've got mothers who are parents taking care of their kids. Maybe they've got a 50-hour-a-week job or whatever. What's your practical favorites when it comes to that?
Oh, yes. I practice this all the time, and I've got to figure out another way, actually, because I do my podcasts doing this. But I would say try to live on the floor and make your floor comfortable, right? You can see here in the back, I have a rug and have a low coffee table. I will put my computer on the coffee table, and I sit with my, like an Indian style, and then I have to, I got to go to the toilet. So I got to get up. So then I would say, let me try to get up without my hands. Let's try to just get up without putting too many the hands on the floor. I eat on the floor. I go in, and now it's lovely. It's summer. I'll go in the garden. I'll eat on the grass. I'm getting some grounding at the same time. I'm getting some sunlight. I'm getting outdoors. I'm getting fresh air, and I have to squat, and I have to stand up again. And again, try to hold your plate and with two hands, and do it without getting off the floor without using your hands. So you can try to do these things in every single moment of the day that you can. And I think it's fun. And maybe people will go, you look ridiculous, but I don't care. I just go, I'm going to be the one laughing when I'm 70, if I'm lucky to get there, right? Assuming that I do. So I think it's a matter of, I would say, floor life. Try to get on the floor as much as you can, work on the floor, eat on the floor, play with your kids on the floor. When the guests come, if we have guests, I'm on the floor. I serve like tea like a Japanese woman, like, I'm on my knees, and why don't you sit on the couch? I'm like, I just like being on the floor. And actually, that's quite natural for me. I've always been like that without even thinking about my future self. I've just been very, I don't know, I guess grounded.
No, wait, that sounds like you're mistake proofing the process, is the way I would put it, my geeky sort of way. Is like you're biohacking the process, because by being on the floor, you have to interrupt constantly that pattern with movement, right? Whereas when you're sitting, you can get hunched over for 4 hours in a row and not move, right? Even if you want to, you'd have to have reminders, you have to do this and that. You're making it where it like just naturally is part of your life. It's like the flow.
Yeah, actually, if you're sitting cross-legged, there's a time you're like, oof, I got to stretch out my legs. So then you stretch out the legs, and then you're like, oh, well, I'm here. I'll just do an extra stretch. And you're there anyways. So you just think about it. Another thing I do is I have toys usually all over the floor, like a ball for my foot. I rub the ball, the little the points on the ball. Yeah. So you can rub your foot. You massage your foot.
Oh yeah. Like the little, I got it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I just have just bands, and because if I trip over it, I go, oh yeah, I could do this. And it's there.
Yes.
And you can take like 30 seconds in a minute, and it adds up. And one thing I learned just recently, as you totally inspired me. Yesterday, I had an interview with Dr. Maurice Snyder, and she has a podcast as well. And we were talking about the blood glucose monitor challenge, because I'm just finishing mine. And she was saying, what I concluded with blood sugar, which is another thing, please, like, get your blood sugar. It's another great test to do. I'm such a fan of these. These are little devices. It's a sensor that you put in the back of your arm. It's a continuous blood glucose monitor, and you have an app on your phone, and you can see how your blood sugar rises and falls with the foods that you eat, the exercise, the stress, the sleep, how this all impacts. And blood sugar is a very important marker to understand your health. And it's a way to delay aging, to have your blood sugar levels stable. It lowers inflammation and so many other things. And so she said, I said, you know what? I tried berberine. I tried apple cider vinegar. I've tried eating vegetables before you eat certain foods that can increase your blood sugar. Let's say a banana, and I love bananas. I eat them, but I noticed, wow, it goes really high. And then it just like, boom, it like drops. So I had the best impact was exercising after I eat the piece of fruit or chocolate or whatever it is that would spike my blood sugar. And I thought, God, that's amazing. So she said, you know what I do? I got small kids. I can't run. I can't go to the gym. So I do air squats right after I eat it. So she does just 3 minutes. Just do, 20 for 1 minute, another 20 for another minute, more or less. No, she does 60. Yeah. 20, 20, and 20. That's what she does. Every minute she does 20 squats. And then she does it for 3 minutes. She says, we all got 3 minutes. And I tested that twice. Totally. I drank grapefruit juice, which should have like gone through the roof. And it was just so stable. I'm like, no way. So exercise is such a powerful tool.
It's magic. Yeah. It's like magic.
So many ways. And it's free. Like, I don't need to spend money on another supplement.
Yeah.
So that's another air squats. So what she does is kind of crazy. She does that 6 times a day.
Okay.
So she does 360 squats a day. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. But she's like, sometimes I just take a break from my kids, and, we all do air squats together as a family, just like, and she incorporates this into her day. And it's like, this is brilliant idea. So,
has she compared it to like walking? I'm curious.
In terms of the blood sugar levels?
Yeah.
Well, she did one day. She told me that she ate a piece of cake. Like, she said, it was the most horrible piece of cake, like you buy in the supermarket. Like,
the highly sugary, grainy, like it's all sugar, right? Yeah.
It was a Saturday. I was in the park with my husband and my son. And and after that, we went for a bike ride. So I wanted to go on a bike ride. So she went for 2 hours on the bike, and she looked at a monitor, didn't even blip.
That's interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Is it the bike, but then walking compared to biking? I wonder.
Walking compared to biking. I don't know the walking compared to biking, but for me, walking definitely lowers the spike for sure. For sure. I would go for about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minute walk. Yeah. And it's so much. If it's watermelon, that really increases me. It'll still have a bump, but not nearly as what it was before with just a walk. It was within the range. Definitely.
Yeah. So again, you just reinforcing the idea that being active, moving, taking care of yourself, eating foods you love that nourish you are all really great foundations if you want to be ready for menopause and beyond. And then of course you can isolate the other things, right? And see, okay, maybe it is thyroid, maybe it is progesterone or something like that. As we wrap up, is there anything else that someone maybe in their 30s, maybe getting toward perimenopause in their 40s should know that we didn't cover?
Oh God, there's
a lot.
Where should I start? Yeah. And I'm trying to think. I would say, don't be afraid. Even if you're seeing all those horrible videos and those horrible reels.
Good point.
And
don't do the fragility narrative. Like, don't adopt the fragility narrative, right? Of menopause.
The same. Yeah. For menopause as well as aging. I see a lot of younger people terrified of aging. Like, they're like all biohacking in their 20s. I'm like, I understand why I'm biohacking, because I can see the wrinkles. I can see, like, you can start seeing the degeneration, but in your 20s, you're like full of collagen. Like, why would you even like in hormones? Like, but they're concerned. And I think they're concerned because of ageist stereotypes. And it's what we see. We're all ageist. There's plenty of research that goes and looks at all of these countries of the world, and everyone's ageist. Some are more, some are less. And ageist, meaning you just have you have a negative association.
Bias against older age. Yeah.
Aging, right. So, but there are countries that are better, like Japan, for example, is more accepted. People aren't so afraid, but I really want to disrupt those ageist stereotypes, because we have a menu of choice on how to age. We of course, the horror stories are there. There are people who are sick. There are people who are frail. There are people who are getting fractures. There are people who are dying, people who are really struggling the last 30 years of life on medication and doctors and all that. But that's just one choice. We have a choice. We can do things to age healthily and the way we want to. We have to be proactive. We have to look for our future selves. And when you think about dementia, cardiovascular disease, and osteoporosis, these aren't diseases that start at age 70 or 65. They start in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and we don't feel them. They're called silent killers because we don't feel our bones getting brittle, or we don't feel our arteries getting full of plaque. We only notice it when we're already there, and then it's kind of late. And it's a good thing. I really strongly recommend people to consider prevention. I know it's not sexy, but everything that you're doing now in your 20s and 30s and 40s is really going to protect your future self. And it gets easier. You may think, oh, it's a job right now to get it sorted out. Yeah, it may be hard in the beginning, but after a while, it becomes a habit and it becomes a lifestyle, and you don't even think about it anymore. And you just don't want to live any other way, because it's just quite normal for you, because you feel so good. So really don't be afraid of aging. And again, we have choices. We can do whatever we want. And when it comes to aesthetics, like if you want to go gray, fabulous. If you want to dye your hair, fabulous. Like do what makes you happy. We got a lot of things that we can to be the way that we want to look and feel as good as we want.
Oh, I love that message, right? Because being happy and having well-being starts now. And it, like you said, it gets easier. Like it's, you've got to take the steps, and some of it is uncomfortable or different, like working out if you don't do it. But trust me, when you're 40, when you're 50, you're going to wish you had done it. And that's what we're talking about here today. So, yeah. All right, Zora, this has been awesome. I know we barely scratched the surface, so folks can definitely find you on your podcast, Hack My Age. And you're also going to be in Physique University as a guest speaker doing a live Q&A. That's on September 23rd. So if you're hearing this before then, you could always jump in before that to catch Zora for a live Q&A with her. Where do you want folks to find you after hearing this amazing podcast?
Wherever they go, I am there, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, X. Everywhere. I've got podcast, but the easiest thing is just go to hackmyage.com, because I'll have all the links to all of whatever area that you put yourself into. I will be there, and you can reach out. I'm still reachable. Send me a message. If I don't see it right away, I'll eventually will see it.
Beautiful. Hackmyage.com. You can find Zora everywhere. She's awesome. She will respond to you. And thank you so much, Zora, for coming on the show to talk about a very important topic. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.